Okay, we are back for day 5 of CIE? It is Friday, which I almost forgot it was Friday. Um, but today we have a really exciting day. So we're going to start off, of course, with our BMO Financial Literacy panel. After that, we'll have our Careers in Gaming panel on this channel. And then as well at the same time, our Call of Duty Top 16s will be starting. So that's a reminder, Top 16s for Call of Duty starting at 2:30. Um, and then we'll move into our Valorant round robin starting at 4 p.m. PST or 7 p.m. if you're in the East. And then at the same time, hoping everything goes to schedule, we should be moving into our Call of Duty Top 8 semifinals and then finals for the night. Um, yeah, but without further ado, today I have with me Sean from BMO. So, Sean, can you introduce yourself and then tell everybody what your favorite video game of all time is?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you for that. My name is Sean, as previously stated, and I am the gaming relations specialist here at BMO, which sounds like a weird job title because it is. It's the first in the world, and essentially, it's my job to help educate people on financial literacy. But I get to do something really cool where I not only get to educate people on financial literacy, but I get to play video games while doing it live on Twitch. So it's been an interesting career. A little bit of background about myself. I've been with the bank for 7 years. I was working the branch for 5 of those years. So I was a personal banker. So I would do things like loans, mortgages, investing, account openings, anything really under the sun. And I had an opportunity to kind of absorb a wealth of knowledge when it came to finances. Because I'll tell you, when I was a student, which was a long time ago. I don't know if you can tell by all the grays in my beard, which was a long time ago. I really didn't know any of this stuff, and if you don't know anything about finances or you're not too familiar with financial literacy, you kind of learn by doing. But money is one of those things where it's very hard to learn by doing. It's very risky to learn by doing. Before that, I was a journalist. I worked at a radio station here. I'm in Windsor, Ontario, and I was a radio producer for 2 years. So I've had quite the interesting career trajectory. And I've been a gamer my whole life. My brother and my mom tell me I was gaming when I was two, playing the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. And I continue to do it day after day. My favorite video game of all time, that's an easy one. I often get caught up when people are like top five, but number one's an easy one, and that's the first Dark Souls game. Honestly, I've played every FromSoft game. I've played a lot of Souls likes. Nothing compares to the first time I ever jumped. And I played Demon Souls before that, but nothing compares to the first time I ever played Dark Souls. I was blown away by the interconnectedness of the world, by how the story and lore is told by items and descriptions, just everything in it enveloped me to the point where anytime FromSoft releases a title, I'm there day one. We got Elden Ring DLC coming next month, actually, June 24th, I believe. So yeah, big FromSoft nerd. Actually, Jen, what's your favorite game? Sorry, I'm just curious. I don't mean to sidetrack on the question, but
No worries. Um, Okay. So there's the I like playing them now games, and then there's the I will always go back to these few games because that's my childhood.
yeah,
So the games that I like play now and I really like is sadly League of Legends and Valorant.
that's not sad. It's all right. It's that seems very stressful, but it's not sad.
Yeah. And then I guess for like history wise, like I grew up on Halo,
Oh,
like
okay.
the entire franchise, and like I love the game, I love the Flood, and even watching the movies and the series that had come out it was so cool.
That's
It was
awesome.
so, so
Those
cool.
are great choices. Those are excellent choices.
Mhm. Did you actually know the Halo movie was partially filmed at SFU?
Oh, really?
Yeah, we are a
That's
big film
awesome.
location.
Were
So
you in it?
no, no, this was I can't say way back. I don't even remember when that movie was made, but it was before I think it was in high school still or
Oh,
something.
okay, okay, fair enough,
So,
fair enough. I thought
I mean, that
that's
would
what
have
you
been
were gonna
cool.
say. Like you're like, hey, actually, I was in that. I was Master Chief. I'm like, oh.
There have been some SFU people like our community that has been part of certain film productions because they just need people. So,
hmm
but
That's awesome.
anyways, back to the actual topic. Financial literacy. So we know for students it can be hard to kind of enter the world of finances, and especially you have to pay tuition and work a part-time job, some of you. Um, so we'll start with like a pretty basic question is what is a credit card and what does it do?
That's a great question because, as an adult, I'm very enveloped in the credit world because a lot of things depend on credit, not just credit cards, but your credit score. And something I didn't know when I was young, I'll tell you, I had my first credit card and I maxed it out right away. I didn't know anything about a credit score. I was just excited to have money and didn't really understand too much about interest. I think I was like 18 at the time. But a credit card is something where you are using borrowed funds to make purchases. So essentially, you're not using your own money, but that being said, you do have to pay back that money. So technically, you are still using your own money and you may have to pay it back with interest. So every credit card has interest associated with it. Interest will vary between different companies depending on where you have your credit card or what type of credit card you have. What I mean by types of credit cards, different credit cards have different reward systems. Some credit cards might not have a reward system, like preferred rate card, for example, which is just a credit card with a lower interest rate, doesn't have a reward system. But different rewards would be like things like air miles, cash back. We have BMO rewards here at BMO. And reward system, I wouldn't get too caught up about it. It's all about personal preference. When you're thinking about, hey, oh, there's all these awards there, rewards there. Which one do I choose? It's all going to come down to your personal preference. For me, I have a cashback card because I like to collect the cash back and just throw it back on my card whenever I have the opportunity. And that works for me. But some people like to travel, so they may use Air Miles or BMO Rewards. Some people like the merchandise on the Air Miles website. I know once I bought the Legend of Zelda. Um, which one was it? Link's
Breath of the
Awakening,
Wild?
the remake. No,
Oh,
the Link's
okay.
Awakening remake for the Switch. Yeah, and I used my Air Miles to buy that. So they do have some gaming stuff on there. Interestingly enough. So yeah, and credit cards are super important, especially when you're a student, because a credit card or a student loan or a student line of credit is how you're going to start establishing your credit once you turn 18. Which in life credit is super important. Credit determines a lot of things, not just financial wise, but some employers they check your credit. Sometimes when you apply for rent, they check your credit. If you want to buy a house, they check your credit. Loans, a lot of things kind of fall under credit. So it is super important to obtain a credit card. You have to apply for one. So there are ones designated particularly for students. Applications involve a number of different steps. You can apply for them directly online or in person. But to apply, you go into the site or you go in person. They pull your credit score. They'll ask you financial information, personal information, and then you get approved. And you'll get your card in the mail within 6 months. So the application process isn't anything too complex. It isn't anything to get worried about. I remember applying for my first credit card. I was sweating because, hey, I didn't really know anything about credit or how it was calculated. So I was just like, I need a credit card. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I'll get one. But yeah, it can be a stressful process. But they are super important, especially like when it comes to establishing credit.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think not. So what is a good credit score, and how can like we find out what it is,
Yeah,
or
so
can we?
a good credit score. So if you don't know too much about credit in Canada falls between 300 and 900. So 900 being the max. Some websites will tell you 850, but 900 it would be like the perfect ideal score. I've only met one person in my life of banking that had a perfect score, and it was blew my mind. So when we talk about good credit scores. There's a couple of ways that that's weighted. I would say so 650 is an average credit score. So a lot of loans can be approved. Mind you, when it comes to loans, like they're looking at other things besides credit scores. Like credit scores do weigh heavily on loan approvals, but they're looking at other things like employment and history and stuff like that. Um, uh, an average credit score is 650. A good credit score would be 70, 725 and over. And then they consider anything over 750 to be an excellent score. There's a couple of different ways you can check your credit. But before you check your credit, there's something that you should know. Sometimes pulling your credit, especially if you're applying for a loan, dings your credit. So sometimes having somebody look at your credit or you pulling your credit yourself will ding it. Luckily, and when I say ding it, I mean it will bring your score down. How many points is determined by what your score is and why you're pulling it. Is it a hard pull? Is it a soft pull? And we can get into that stuff. Very exciting. But so that's going to be determined by a number of different things. There's a couple of ways you can pull it without dinging your credit score, which is what I would recommend if you are just looking to see what your credit is. First and foremost, let's say you're a BMO client, you just pull up the mobile app. There's a thing called My Credit Score. You click on it, and it gives you your score. Nice and easy, doesn't pull it, no hard hit or anything. And you're able to see your score. You're also able to see different things on your credit report, which I'll cover in just a second. There's two major credit reporting facilities in Canada, TransUnion and Equifax. Both of these reporting agencies do allow you to pull a free credit report that doesn't ding your credit. You can pull them online either at the TransUnion website or the Equifax website. Another thing is certain apps. I see ads for particular apps online that say, you know, you can pull your, I think Credit Karma maybe is one of them here in Canada, where you can pull your score and look at it. The great thing about being in the 2020s and onward is it's very easy to find your credit score without actually dinging it. Pulling your credit score too is important. Your report is important for a number of reasons. First and foremost, to make sure there's no fraud on your credit. You might, let's say you pull up your credit report and it says you have a credit card that you never applied for, or it shows things called inquiries, inquiries being anytime you apply for credit. It may show that you've applied places you've never applied, or it may show that your personal information is incorrect. Also, once in a while, not always, but once in a while, credit reporting, there could be a mistake. And that happened to me, actually. When I started working at the bank, I applied for a credit card. And at this point, I had been at a school, I think for 3 months. I'd graduated. I had used a government loan. So here in Ontario, the provincial portion was called OSAP. And when you have a student loan or a student government loan, repayment works 6 months after you graduate. That's when you start paying your credit loan. It's called repayment assistance for those 6 months. Um, so I had applied for a credit card and unfortunately got declined. I was like, I don't understand. Like my credit's good. I had an old credit card that I completely got rid of and paid it off. That was the credit card that when I was 18, I didn't understand and I maxed it out. Um, but it turns out that OSAP had accidentally sent me to a collection agency saying that I hadn't paid my OSAP, even though I wasn't supposed to be paying my OSAP. So I ended up calling OSAP and saying, hey, you know, there's been a mistake. They're like, oh, yeah, you're in repayment assistance. We'll fix it. The only thing is that if there's ever an inaccuracy on your credit report, it does take 3 months to fall off of your credit report. The good news is if you are like applying for a loan and it's timely, they can give you like a letter or a note saying it was a mistake. So that way your lender can be like, okay, actually, you know, this is not important. There's no frame time frame of how often you should check your credit. I check my credit all the time just because it's on my app. It's very easy to access, and I'm very much into credit building. I'm a little bit of a financial nerd that way, so it's important to check it. And you know what, that kind of takes away what I was talking about earlier too, being able to check it and being able to see what your score is at any time. That takes away the anxiety of will I or will I not get approved for a loan. Because if your credit is strong and you know your credit is strong, that leads to good odds of being approved for different things at better interest rates. So Seeing that and knowing that kind of gives you that peace of mind.
Mhm.
But yeah, credit super important to check it, stuff like that.
Okay. We do have a question from a viewer.
All
Aiden
right.
asks, should you pay off your credit card right after every purchase, or just once at the end of the month, or does it make a difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, people have a difference of opinion of how you should pay your credit card. One thing of note, so let's say you used your credit card and you have a balance on it. By the time it comes due, if you just make the minimum payment, you end up paying interest on everything that's left over. If you pay your credit card before your payment is due, you pay off the entire balance. You don't pay interest. So you have the access of your credit. You don't pay interest. But another thing is that you're building those rewards I was talking about earlier, like your air miles and your cash back by making purchases and paying it off. You're also building your credit. You're showing a good a good habit of paying your credit card on time and not missing payments and paying off the balance in full. That's going to boost up your credit card. Me personally, what I do is I'll make most of my purchases on my credit card, so I get that cash back, so I have that reward. I'll do that as soon as I make a purchase, pay it back. That way, I know it's paid. I don't like paying bills. I don't. Let me rephrase that because I'm sure nobody likes. I've never met anybody like, oh, I love paying my bills. I don't like having to worry about when I should pay my bills because I have the mind of a goldfish. I am all over the place, and so I like to make sure that things are paid in advance. So that works for me. Definitely, like there's a huge benefit of paying it before it's due and paying off the balance in full. Does that mean you have to? No. I mean, that's what credit is for. You will end up paying interest on it if you still have a balance after the fact. But if you really need it and it's worth it, and it's, you're not in a situation where your cash flow, which is the amount of money you have left after all your bills and expenses and stuff like that, uh if your cash flow is like depleted, then maybe it's an issue, but that's what they're there for. So yeah, definitely a good amount of like healthy financial things you can do to build rewards and credit and to not have to pay interest. But once again, credit is there for you to use whenever you need it. So if you're not able to make those payments, that is okay as well, as long as it's manageable, of course.
Mhm, mhm. I think that's all really good advice, and I think someone else in the chat had the same question. Um, that's really good to know. Okay, so we will switch a bit off of credit cards and talk about some accounts. So
Okay.
I think we all get the ads where it's, excuse me, this account with this fee, this account with that fee, or try this account. And can we kind of simplify the, like, if someone is invest or has a little bit of money for the first time, and they're to open up one or two accounts, like what would be the typical recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, for students, student plans, there's no fee, so you don't have to pay a fee while you're a student and up to a year after you graduate. So fees aren't really kind of a worry. After you graduate, hopefully you find a job. I know after I graduated, it took me forever to find a job. That's why I say hopefully. But yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of accounts. It can be overwhelming. Things to know about different accounts are the types of accounts. Of course, there's checking accounts, which are just used for daily expenses. So making purchases with your debit card, getting direct deposits. So if you have employment, your money going in there, or if you have like the student government loan, your money going in there. Having pre-authorized debits or bill payments, so money coming out automatically to pay your phone bill or different things. That's where credit, or that's where I'm stuck in credit. That's where checking accounts really shine. That's what they were designed for. And most often than not, if you are paying a fee, that's what you're paying the fee for, and usually it's based off the amount of transactions you're using. What I mean by that is, so for students with the no fee plan, unlimited transactions, all good, don't have to worry about fees. But there are like plans for people who hypothetically aren't students that are like say 12 transactions a month. They pay a fee for those 12 transactions. It's relatively cheap, but if they go over the 12, they end up paying fees per transactions. That would be for people who don't use their checking account a lot. Then we kind of get into savings accounts, which are for saving. Uh, pretty straightforward there. There are a number of different savings accounts that have different advantages. I'll just speak from BMO particularly because I know there's like millions of different savings accounts there. But we have something called a premium rate savings, which kind of operates like a checking account. It's a very low interest rate, 0.1%. Sorry, 0.01%. So it's not even a full percentage. Yeah, that's essentially used for like moving money. Not the best option if you're someone who's looking to aggressively save, but if you're just getting started with saving, it could be a good option as well. There's another thing called a savings amplifier account, which is a more high interest savings account. The interest rate on that, I believe, is 1.9%. So a lot higher than the 0.01% interest rate you're getting on your premium rate savings account. The difference between the two is that there are, so for the savings amplifier, there are unlimited no fee self-serve transfers to your other BMO account. What that means is going into your app and transferring from your savings to your checking. But if you were to go to an ATM or to go to a teller and have them transfer or pull the money out of the ATM, actually at the ATM, if you transfer it yourself, you're okay. But if you pull it out of the ATM directly out of the account, that's when you start seeing fees. And then another account would be like a savings builder account, which is a kind of an interesting thing for saving. Is the interest rate is 0.5%, so lower than the savings amplifier account. But if you put in $200 a month, increase the balance by $200 a month, you get bonus interest of 2%. So you end up netting about 2.5% every month by making those transfers. So those are kind of the difference. So checking just for transactions, savings for savings. And then we get into investment accounts. Then we stack a whole bunch of other accounts onto things. I get a lot of questions in the stream of like, what account should I use? What's the best way to save? And honestly, there isn't one answer for the best way to save. And the reason I say that is because every individual has different savings goals. For me personally, I'm saving to buy my first house. So a lot of what I'm putting money into are directly correlated with that goal. So for example, let's say hypothetically, I'm just saving because next month I want to buy something. Nothing in a PS5, I don't know. And so, you want liquidity. Liquidity is just accessing your cash. You also probably want something you can transfer in and out quickly. You don't have a long time horizon, is very small. So you're probably going to go with the savings account because you're just kind of putting money aside to make a purchase. Where if you're looking for retirement, you're like, I'm going to save for the future and I'm going to retire when I'm 35 or whatever. You're probably looking at more long-term investing and you're probably looking at RRSP accounts. So that's where the type of account is going to be different for every individual. It depends on your savings goals. When it comes to investment accounts, there are registered accounts and non-registered accounts. Registered accounts means that there's tax implications or tax protections put on by the government because they are registered with the government. Registered accounts would be things like your tax-free savings account, your RRSP, your first home savings account, things like that. So there are things that protect you against specific types of taxes or ways that you're taxed. You get tax deductions, those kind of things. And we can talk about the differences there. And then non registered are investment accounts, which you can invest in. But there are tax implications, like you have to pay taxes on the interest you accumulate in those accounts. So there's a lot of accounts and there's a lot of information and there's a lot of different uses for accounts and stuff like that. But what I like to always tell people is that, if you are ever curious about what account you can use for whatever your particular goal is, really sit down and chat with somebody, whether it's a banker, a family member, or live on I'll put a plug here. Live on Thursday with me. Like, it's ultimately going to depend on you and what your goals are and things like that. Because yes, there's a lot of information out there and a lot of things to absorb, and it's all going to be hyper dependent on what your goals are. So
Mhm. Yeah, I know when I started investing because I worked in high school and in university where it was okay, so I have my savings account, but what am I gonna do with the rest of the money? Like, am I just gonna let it sit there? And
yeah,
probably that is not the best idea if we want our funds to grow.
yeah,
So I know most people have heard of like the few main accounts, so a TFSA, the tax-free savings account. Um, the new one, the homeowners. So can we talk a little bit about what those are and how are they the same? How are they different?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, before we do, like what you just said is important to think about. It's something that a lot of people don't think about before we jump into the description of those accounts. But that's a great question you should ask yourself is like, where is my money sitting? And how do I make it grow? Because if you think about growth in money, yes, there are accounts that earn you interest. But you also have to think of like that big, ugly, unseen thing. It's not actually here. You can't feel it or see it, but it's called inflation. You hear people talking about it all the time. Inflation, 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 because especially lately, because inflation has been relatively high in the last couple of years. And inflation is the cost of goods and services. Like a basic definition of inflation is the cost of goods and services over time going up. So let's say inflation is 5%. And you have a checking account, you have a bunch of money in there, and it's earning 0%. The value of your money at the end of that year is negative 5%. You didn't
Mhm.
lose any money, but things became more expensive. So the value wasn't there. I just thought that was important. Sorry. So
Yeah.
yeah, so the tax free. So we can go over the different tax implications of them. So the first home savings account is a registered account that kind of mixes benefits of the tax free savings and the RRSP. A tax free savings is exactly what it sounds like. When you invest in a tax free savings, any interest that you earn within that account is tax free. So you see tax free growth in there. There are contribution limits. We were talking about this before the show, but
Yeah.
contribution limits are determined by how old you are. So if you were born in 2009 and you have a tax free savings account, you never contributed to it. I think your contribution limit is $95,000. It goes up every year. So, for example, it went up $7,000 this year. So, what you'll need to do is to determine that is, how many years have I been 18? Okay. And then you can check how many times it's gone up since then. There is an easier way to check what your contribution room is. And because a lot of people don't like math. I don't like math. I'm a finance guy. I still don't like math. You can check your notice of assessment after you do your taxes. So you can log into your MyCRA account to see what your contribution room is in there. So yes, the tax-free savings, any money you invest in there is tax-free. And another benefit to registered accounts as well, which is not something that a lot of young people think of, which is good. You shouldn't be thinking of this, but is you can have beneficiaries on it. So knock on wood, if anything were to happen to you, that money doesn't get sent to probate to the government. It gets directly contributed back to your loved ones and stuff like that. So that's a benefit to registered accounts. RRSPs, their tax implications there are that any money you put into a registered retirement savings plan is tax deductible. So what that means is that if I put $8,000 into an RRSP, I don't have to pay taxes on that $8,000. So when it comes time for tax time, I have a receipt saying I put money in my RSP. The money that I put in there I don't have to pay taxes on, so I may get a return from income tax or something like that. RSPs, when you turn 71, turn into something called a RIF, which is a registered retirement income fund, and that's when you have to start pulling money out of it, and then you start getting taxed on that money. If at any point the money in your RSP is pulled out, you pay taxes on it. So it is tax deductible as long as it's in the account. When you pull money out of the account, that's when you start paying income tax on it. So the Canadian government, they did something really cool. At least I think it's cool because I'm looking to buy a house and I've been utilizing it. They did something really cool and they created the first home savings account. The first home savings account is kind of an amalgamation between the TFSA and the RRSP. On the tax-free savings side, your contributions are tax-free. Any growth within the account is tax-free. Yay! Round of applause. That's awesome. And any money you put in your first home savings account. I always call it first time home buyer savings account, but I
Hmm.
know that it's first home savings account. Any money you put in there is tax deductible. So much like an RRSP, any money that you put in there is tax deductible. You don't have to pay tax on that money. The first home savings account is the contribution limit is $8,000 a year. Your carry forward at any point is $8,000 a year as well. What that means is that this is going to get a little bit confusing for a second. What that means is that okay, I opened my account in 2023. I didn't put any money in it for whatever reason. So I carry that forward. So this year I have a contribution limit of $16,000. Next year, 2025, if I don't put any money in it, that year I also have a contribution limit of $16,000. So it doesn't go up by $8,000 each year. It doesn't accumulate that way. So your carry forward is $8,000 per year. So you don't get to carry forward the $8,000 from the 2 years, just the 1 year. That's the carry forward. The lifetime maximum is $40,000. Your money, much like the RSP, if you pull it out and you're not buying your first house with that money, that's when you start paying taxes on it, because it's only tax free and tax deductible if you use that money towards your first home. So that's why they call it a
Mm.
first home savings account. Full circle.
Wow. If you use it for its intention, you
Yeah.
get the benefits. If you don't,
Yeah.
sorry, too bad. I think you're actually thinking of the first time. I think it's like a first time homeowners
Yeah, the
grant or
first
something like
time
that.
home buyers incentive. That's why it's stuck in my
Yeah.
brain, because for years I'm like, hey, you could pull $35,000 out of your RSP, the first time home buyers incentive, or the first time home buyers plan, which is a completely different thing. So there's
Mm.
two different things that are first time home buyer, and then they came out with an account. They're like, this is just first home savings account. We took out the
Yeah.
buyer. So
Yeah. And this account is relatively new, I think, to
yep,
Canada for
came out
us. Yeah.
last year in April, and then they became available in November of 2023. So
Mhm. Yeah. So for anyone who lives in Canada, especially the really expensive cities, this might be something perfect for you to put your paychecks into along with your TFSA, so you can just get all that growth and pay no taxes.
yeah, there's a double-edged sword there, or not a double-edged sword. Sorry, there's something two-pronged you can do as well if you're looking to buy a house. Speaking of the first-time home buyer savings plan, is that you can use your FHSA, so build it for your down payment. That's what you're doing, building it for cash to put down on a house. You can also use your RRSP for that, for the first-time home buyers plan, which is you can use up to $35,000 from your RSP towards the purchase of a house without paying taxes on it. So you can kind of use both at once, which I think is cool.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's really nice that there's a little bit more help that we get with homes because they're so expensive now, and
Oh, I know.
it's
I've been looking for it quite a few years. Yeah. Yeah, I know. This is the year though. I've been saying this on stream. I've been putting it out there. I don't know if I believe in this. My wife believes in it quite a bit, but I've been putting it out in the universe. This is the year.
manifesting.
I'm manifesting.
Manifest you have a
You know,
home.
I just manifesting a house. Wouldn't it be crazy if I walked outside my rental and there was just a house there? I just manifested it.
Mm, yeah, but that'd be pretty cool.
That'd be
Okay,
awesome, man.
so kind of a little bit tangential to the accounts and all of that. Um, so there's this thing that in finances that's risk tolerance.
Mhm.
And can you kind of explain to everyone kind of what is risk tolerance and how that's determined?
Yeah, for sure. So whenever we're talking about investing, whenever we're talking about loans as well, there's a certain amount of risk you're taking on. When it comes to investing, the reason that there's risk is because even though we have all these kind of different investment accounts, I'll use the tax-free savings as an example going forward. Those accounts work as, let's say, that kitchen drawer where you have a bunch of batteries and elastics. You just keep throwing stuff in there. So your tax-free savings is the drawer, but inside of that drawer, you can house a number of different investments. So you can just have a savings account in there. You can have GICs, which are guaranteed income certificates, and they are guaranteed an interest rate after a particular amount of time. Or you could have things like ETFs. You can have things like mutual funds. I'll explain these in a sec because this is the reason there's risk. And then you have things like stocks and shares and bonds and all this different kind of things that are very confusing at first, but they make a lot of sense once you start doing it. So GICs, when we talk about risk, there's no risk with GICs in terms of with your money. Your capital is secured. When I say your capital is secured, that just means whatever you put in is not going to go down. You're not going to lose any money. The way GICs work is that, let's say you have a GIC for 1 year, and let's say hypothetically you get 4% after that year. You know that's what you're going to get at the end of the year. So after the year is done, you get 4% on whatever the amount of money you put in. You have no opportunity to lose money. You're guaranteed that 4%. That's why I say your capital is secure. The downside, there is slight risk to GICs because The downside is you can't break them. You can't just pull your out. When I was talking about earlier, I use the term liquidity. That your money in a GIC is not liquid. It is locked into that asset for whatever amount of time you put it in. There's also things like progressive GICs, which there's no risk. Your capital is secured. They kind of cross and intersect where like it's kind of like a mutual fund, kind of like a GIC, where you have an opportunity to earn a certain percentage at the end of 4 5 years, but the opportunity to earn nothing as well. So your capital is secure. You don't lose any money. The risk is that you might not earn the full potential, or you might not earn any interest at the end of that. Then, where risk becomes super important is things like mutual funds, ETFs, and shares and equities and things like that. Because the way that mutual funds and ETFs are designed is that they fluctuate. So put a bar graph here. They go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. So there is a potential to lose money there. When we talk about risk, especially when it comes to things like mutual funds and ETFs, there are varying levels of risk in each of those investment types. So I wouldn't be able to say mutual funds are extremely risky because every different mutual fund is built differently. And what I mean by that is they are basically a collection of funds. So there's a number of equities in there, equities being like stock you can purchase in a company. There's things like bonds, money market. So there are varying levels of risk. There's also a portion that's just cash, which doesn't go into anything, it's just there for safety. So some investments are more weighted in things like equity, so share, which tend to be hyper aggressive. And some investments are lower rated, where they tend to be in things like money market, so things that aren't very risky. ETFs, same idea. ETFs are a little bit different than mutual funds. Some ETFs are index, which means that they might follow. You often hear people say like the exchange, the Toronto Stock Exchange, which is just a number of companies that are trading their stocks under this one umbrella. So let's say an ETF is indexing it, just means it's following it. So it's a little bit more passive. ETFs tend to be a little bit cheaper. There's different kinds of ETFs, just like there's mutual funds. So there are ETFs that are less risky. There are ETFs that are more risky. And then you get into things like equities and shares, which is kind of like self investing, like going out, maybe you're a day trader and you're buying different stocks and things like that. That tends to be the riskiest. So how do you determine how do you determine what your level of risk is? Because maybe you're sitting there and you're like, I don't necessarily want to lose money, but what's the breaking point? Risk is determined in a couple of different factors. Earlier, when I was talking about savings goals, risk is part of that as well. Because if I'm buying a house next year, I don't want to be that risky with my money. I could take some risk, but I don't want to be that risky with my money because I only have a year. The way that mutual funds and ETFs are designed, usually the more time you have in the market, the better it does. The reason I keep doing this, you notice it goes up at the end, is because often what trends you see in mutual funds and ETFs are periods of, and this is just the way the economy cycles, are periods of down, periods of up, periods of down. But usually, time after time, after all those periods of downs and ups, there's some growth at the end. So having a longer time horizon means you might be able to afford more risk because it could grow over time. So your goal is going to be hyper dependent on your risk as well. So if I'm planning for retirement, I don't want to say it, but I'm 33. So I'm probably not retiring for another 32 years, which means that I have a long time. So if my money goes down next year, I still have 31 years before I have to retire. So I might not need that money. So that's kind of one factor that goes into risk. Another factor is like how much of your money are you investing? How comfortable are you with loss? And what that means is like, let's say I lose, I don't know, let's say I lose $100 out of my investment. Am I going to be able to sleep at night knowing that I lost that $100? That's going to be different among different people. Not because I used to get this question a lot in branch. It's like, oh, because I'm not comfortable with risk, does that mean like there's nothing for me? Which is no, that's not the case. Everybody has varying levels of risks for various reasons. But those are kind of the factors that determine that. If you're wondering, like, oh, what should I buy then? Usually, when you open an investment account, so let's say you're meeting with an individual or you're doing it online, yeah, they do like a survey which helps determine your level of risk and how comfortable you are with risk. So if you're like, I don't know, and you don't have that kind of financial knowledge of different products, there's always a person there to kind of walk you through it and help you determine what level of risk seems most comfortable with you. And then also, like, levels of risk change. Like, I could think today, if I lose this amount of money, I won't be able to sleep. But maybe I wake up tomorrow and it's like, you know what? I lost that amount of money. I'm fine. Like, I can sleep. I can be more risky or whatever. So it does change over time. But yeah, time horizon, super important. The amount of your investable income, and kind of various factors like that play into your level of risk.
Mhm. That's a lot of information. So anyone who's
Yes.
watching, don't feel super intimidated by this. It takes a little while to understand, and you all are still
Yeah.
super young.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good note. Like, we're packing a lot of information into 1 hour. Like, it definitely, if it's something that intrigues you, it's something you can learn. It's gonna take more than an hour. The reason I love being at the bank, especially when I was in the branch, still to this time too, not as significantly as that, I was always learning about new things financially because, finances change over the years, but also there's just so much knowledge and information out there that you could not pack an hour in any kind of session and be like, I'm a financial genius. Like, I think it's impossible unless, there's someone out there who could prove me wrong, but I think it's impossible.
Unless you have like a built-in AI that'll tell you exactly where stocks are going. It was one of those things like what was it? GameStop stocks? Or as
Yeah,
a
to
as
the
a
moon.
joke, people
GME to
just
the moon.
whoom,
Yeah.
and people who were part of it did really well.
Yeah.
Um, so it was I like that because it was such like a joke,
Yeah.
but it's actually like that's how finances works. A joke that turned into reality, really.
Yeah. It was cool too because I was in the branch when that was happening, and like after that, young people were coming in and asking about investing. So because it was kind of like front page news, people were like, "Hey, I'm interested." They might have been disappointed when I said, not all stocks earn you tons of money overnight. But it was cool because it kind of got them thinking and stuff like that, which was awesome. Like, I love that when there's like a news story out there, and maybe it's memeable, but it gets you thinking like, hey, you know what? Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something interesting there. Maybe I should invest. So
Yeah, yeah. It's all good publicity for
yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
Okay, so probably have enough time for a couple more questions. So one of the questions we have here is, what is an emergency fund, and how much should you have in your emergency fund?
An emergency fund is exactly what it sounds like. It's a fund that's there just in case there's an emergency. Emergencies being things like your basement floods, or your car breaks down, or your phone bill is really high for some reason. Emergencies come in all shapes and sizes and affect different people differently. So, an emergency fund is a fund that you create. That way, you have the money set aside for when there is an emergency, because there's nothing worse than your car, because I've been there, your car breaking down and you don't have the money like right away to pay for it, so maybe you have to use your line of credit or a loan or something like that and then pay it back. So that's exactly what emergency funds are for. The guideline is that you should have 3 months of expenses saved in your emergency fund. Does that seem realistic for everybody? Probably not. That's a lot of money. If you do your budget, 3 months of expenses is probably somewhere of about or upwards of 50% of your monthly income. So it can be a lot, but start small. Easy ways to like create these funds are things called continuous savings plans. Continuous savings plans are essentially automatic transfers from your checking account into a savings account that you can set up every time you get paid. So if I get paid on a Thursday, let's say I put 10% of whatever my income into a particular savings account for a particular goal. At first, I may be like, "Oh, that's a lot of money. I need this money." But then you kind of get in the mindset of, "Oh, you know what? I'm comfortable without this money. I've been doing it for so long. Like, it's just part of my budget now." And that's a quick way to kind of accumulate an emergency fund. So getting started is always the hardest part. Whatever you do, whether it's saving, investing, looking at a particular goal, even things outside of financing, uh, starting is always the hardest part, and then once you get into a routine, it becomes easier. I was just at a work thing the other day, and they gave us a card, and it said it takes 21 days to form a habit. So if you're overwhelmed at first, you know, take some time, get into the groove and that kind of thing. It's not going to happen overnight, but getting started is definitely, for me at least. Maybe it's not for some people. Maybe getting started is the easiest thing, and then doing it is hard. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure BMO offers a wide range of services, so it's really students like get in there, talk to somebody from one of the branches, and I'm sure they'll explain to you like all the options and what suits you best, 'cause that is what you guys are there for.
yeah, the best thing about talking to someone, a financial advisor or me on Twitch, is it doesn't cost you anything, just time. Just costs you time.
Mhm.
And more likely than not, and it's been like in my 5 years of being in a branch, whenever someone came in worried about something, usually by the end of the conversation, they were a lot more relaxed. So they kind of built up this idea in their head, like, I can't, like, for example, I can't pay my mortgage. What do I do? And it's like, actually, we have something like if you need to take a break from a payment for a month for your mortgage, you could do this. So free to talk to you could talk to your parents or like your siblings or your family members too. I talk to my wife ad nauseum about finances all the time. So uh, yeah, just talking to someone usually gets like the stress out of it. Finances are stressful. It's just it's a big part of your mental health. A lot of things come down to what kind
Mhm.
of financial situation you are in. So worst case scenario, you talk to someone and there's no solution, but that's I can say in my 5 years of banking, I never came to the conclusion, okay, there's no solution for you. Like there's always something there, and maybe just
Mhm.
talking it out gets you to that point. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You touched on it a little bit earlier, setting aside, I think, 3 months of expenses. What, I guess, in the, we'll say the most typical person, um, how would you recommend their, I guess, paycheck to be broken down between like rent and tuition and things that are fun that they want to do? Because I think what I was told growing up was 30% to rent, and that's all my parents ever really told me. So I was like, okay, I might need to find out a little bit more about this.
yeah,
So yeah.
in this market, if 30% of your income covers rent, you are doing really well because rent is so
Yeah.
expensive. But there is a general rule of thumb when it comes to budgeting. Like I would use the general rule of thumb to get started, feel it out, and then kind of change it to the what suits you best. But the general rule of thumb, I don't know. I keep pulling my thumb. I actually don't know what rule of thumb means, anyways. But the general rule of thumb is 50% towards necessities. So that's things like your living expenses, food, your bills, those kind of things. 50 in an ideal world, 50% of your income should cover that. I know right now things are very expensive, so you might be dipping into a lot more than 50%. But general rule of thumb, 50% for expenses and necessities, 30% for wants. You got to treat yourself. As good as financial health is important, mental health is important as well. So
Mhm.
30% for wants. So as a gamer, we know it costs way more than 30% for our habits, but 30% for wants is the general rule of thumb, and then 20% for savings. That's a good starting point. But like I said, if you gotten to a situation where it's like, yeah, 50% of my income isn't going to cover all of my expenses, just relocate, see where your cash flow is at, sit down and talk to somebody because maybe there's an issue with your cash flow. And what I mean by that is, let's say I have like a very high interest rate credit card and I'm paying it and I'm paying it, I'm paying it, and it's just not going anywhere. So I'm just paying all this money to it. The interest is still accumulating. I'm not putting a dent into it. There are solutions for that as well to make your interest payments less and pay it off in a timely manner. So you open up your cash flow, which will help your budget. But yeah, that's the general rule of thumb. The 50-30-20 rule: 50% expenses and necessities, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really helpful to know, just so that there's also a little bit of less stress thinking that like I'm really off. This is wrong, that is wrong, especially with gas prices. I don't know how they are in Ontario.
They're bad.
They're bad. They're just bad. Okay, they're bad across the board.
They're not as
Um,
bad as other places. Like I think I filled up. I think I filled up at like 164 or something like that. So
164.
I think so. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I hallucinated that. Let me see.
Let me check. I was like, I don't drive very often, so I was like, but my family does. So they're telling me that it's like it was hovering around 2. So that's where I know a lot of people are
I
taking
haven't
the
filled up
hits
in
on their
2
cars.
weeks. Let's see. Maybe I can find it online. It's not pretty, I'll tell you that.
It really isn't.
Yeah,
Um,
161 was, 3 hours ago at Petro, 161.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say coming from West Coast, you guys are a little lucky over there. We're paying
Yeah.
190, 195 too.
That's why I said
But
it's
all over
probably
too.
not as bad as, other places in Canada, but yeah, it's still pretty pricey. Because I remember, like, I didn't need gas when I was a kid, but I remember my parents going and seeing, like, like less than 50 cents per liter or per gallon or whatever, and
Yeah.
thinking like, "Oh, like, oh, if only." I'm that old man who's like, "I paid 51 cents for a cheeseburger in 1996."
Yeah. I would definitely remember my parents when I was younger. They were like, "Oh, gas is like over $1 now. Like it used to be like 90 whatever." And now they're sitting there like, "Oh, maybe we should walk more, save a little bit of
Yeah,
money," which is
yeah,
sometimes that's what it takes. Trim a little here, trim a little there, and
that's good
okay.
advice.
Yeah, okay. So we have time for one last question. And this will be just a kind of a general question. What are some tips you would give to young adults and students kind of trying to manage their expenses and kind of dive into that financial literacy a little bit more?
Go to twitch.tv/BMO. No, I'm just kidding. uh, yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, like starting is always the hardest part. My best advice when it comes to anything financial is that if you do not understand something, ask somebody and talk about it with somebody, whether that's an advisor or your parent, because financial literacy is there for you to consume, but you have to kind of go out and find it yourself. It's not generally something
Hmm.
that I don't know now, but when I was in high school, I definitely didn't know anything about financial literacy or taxes or anything like that. So you kind of have to go out and find the information yourself. Also, like when people talk about, like I was talking earlier about budgeting, like general rule of thumb or guidelines, like definitely everybody's circumstance is different and situation is different, so you can use particular things for guidelines, but find what suits you, which is important, because like I said earlier, finances it's a very stressful thing, it's a very heavy topic, finances, and you want to make sure that yes, you're taking care of your finances, but you're also taking care of your mental health. So, an important tip, which is something that I learned very young, is don't compare yourself to other people. You're going to save the way that you're going to save, and that works for you. Everybody's income is different. Find what works for you, and if that works, that's great. It's so easy to get stuck in a rut comparing to someone like you. For example, we were talking about GME and being like, "Oh, this person made so much money in an investment, and I didn't make anything," and it's like that's okay. You tried something out, it didn't work. Like just figure it out. But I think that's important, not just for your financial health, but for your mental health as well. And then yeah, definitely make a budget. Budgeting is super important, and having a budget is super important because it's so easy. I'm going to say the old man thing again, but it's so easy nowadays to spend money. It's never been easier to spend money. I will tell you, like sometimes I go on a tapping spree and I'm tapping and I'm tapping. They say it's this amount, and I'll tap and I'll go home and I'll be like, how did I spend so much money? And budgeting will definitely help you with that and help you better understand that. And allocating your funds into different accounts and splitting it up will certainly help you budget as well. But yeah, yeah, talk. I think number one is the most important. If you ever have a financial question or are curious about something financial, or find yourself in a financial situation, talk to someone. Oftentimes too, like people, they'll be like, I can't pay this or I can't pay that. And more often than not, you can call the let's say the lender, or the billing company and talk to them about it, and they can find a solution. So that's another important thing about discussing finances. It's uncomfortable. It's weird. Even now, I'm to discussing it. I'm sweating profusely. So I completely understand, but it's important nonetheless.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, that's all some really good advice. We covered a lot of topics: checking accounts, saving accounts, investing, GICs. budgeting, estimations, all of that. So that was a lot again for an hour. So if you anyone out there who wants to learn a little more, definitely check out the BMO Next Level stream. You guys stream Thursdays at 7 p.m.
EST,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
yes, that is
Okay,
correct.
yes. Right. 7 p.m. EST. So check it out. Sean's there. We'll definitely answer your questions. If not, walk into a BMO branch, say hello, ask them some questions. They're so helpful and so willing to help you out because it is scary. It is a lot. Um, but yeah, so that brings us to the end of this panel. So thank you, Sean, for
Yeah,
being
thanks for
here
having me.
and talking about this for the last hour or so. Um, so up next, we will be taking a short break, and then we will be back with our careers in gaming and esports panels. We'll have four amazing guests on there, and Sean may or may not be one of them. So that's coming up at 2:30 PST or 5:30 EST, depending on where you are. And then at the same time that that's happening, we'll be starting our Call of Duty tournament. So anyone who is playing, make sure you're in our Discord and you're chatting with our admin so we can get you all set up. And then at 4 p.m. PST or 7 p.m. EDT, EST, I keep calling them different things. We'll be starting our Valorant round robin, so that will be on CIE 2, and then we'll be starting to stream our top eights for Call of Duty. So definitely stay tuned for both of those. Some super exciting panels and an exciting tournament, two tournaments actually, and we will see you later. Take care.
Bye.